Hey, everybody, this is Elizabeth Potts Weinstein. Oh, I think it might have started 2 seconds. Again, this is Elizabeth Potts Weinstein. And today we're doing a Q&A live stream for any small business legal questions you might have. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat over there. I think that's the direction that it happens to be. There's over one question in there. I also have some questions that were posted in other places. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get right into it. If you have any other questions while I'm talking or follow-up things, feel free to post them in the chat. Okay, so the first question is from Elisa Ruiz, I think is how you would say your name. And she says, hello, Elizabeth. I would like to know, how does an LLC owner get paid by the company, and do you need to be on payroll? So the question really depends upon how your LLC is taxed. So you can have an LLC that is taxed as a sole proprietorship or a partnership. It's a sole proprietorship if it's one owner, a partnership if it's two or more owners. Or you can have an LLC that is taxed as an S Corp or even a C Corp, but most of the time people pick an S Corp. If your LLC is taxed as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, then any profits that you make that you want to give to yourself as the owner are paid out as distributions. This is just, the company just writes you a check and you have to keep track of it. And then at the end of the year, you pay taxes on that. You may want to pay taxes on it quarterly basis if it's enough money. That kind of gets into the weeds of tax law, which we're not going to do here. Now, if it's an LLC taxed as an S Corp, that's different. When an LLC is taxed as an S Corp, then you pay yourself two ways. You first have to pay yourself a salary where you need to have some kind of payroll system set up. It can be a payroll where you get paid every week or twice a month or once a month. That's actually what I do with my S Corp. I actually pay myself weekly because I like to get paid weekly. But you can do it less often than that, even quarterly or whatever you want to do. You have to pay yourself a salary that is reasonable for the job that you're doing for the business. So for me, it would be a lawyer. So if you're a copywriter, what would you pay a copywriter to do the work that you're doing? You may not be working as, for example, a copywriter for 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, because a lot of the work that you do as a business owner isn't copywriting. It's running the business, being the CEO, doing marketing, all that kind of stuff. So you can make an argument that you don't pay yourself that same amount. But the idea is that you pay yourself some kind of salary where you had to pay self-employment tax on it. For the distributions that come out, which can come out of profit distributions on top of that could pay yourself once a month or once a quarter or once a year at the end of the year. I just do mine at the end of the year because it's easier to do the bookkeeping that way. That is a distribution, kind of like the partnership distributions. Now, as far as the logistics go of paying yourself, as I was saying, for the S Corp, you set up payroll. For an LLC that's taxed as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, you really are just writing yourself a check, but I highly recommend that you do it on some kind of a regular basis. So once a week, once a month, whatever really makes sense for your kind of business, you pay yourself. In the beginning, you're not going to be able to pay yourself the same amount each time because you don't make a reliable income yet. But the timing can be the same. So maybe one week you pay yourself $15 and then the next week you can pay yourself $1,000. The idea is that the amounts will eventually kind of even out as your business evens out, but the timing it's good to get into a habit of paying yourself regularly. So as I said, if you have any other questions, you go ahead and post them in the chat and then I can answer them. I have some other questions that are from before that people have sent in. One of them is, should you get a trademark first or an LLC first? So let's say you're starting a business that's going to be Weinstein Financial Consulting is the name of your business. This is a business I used to have. And in that business, you're thinking of forming an LLC, but you haven't gotten all the paperwork done yet. And you're also thinking of applying for a trademark. So which should you do first, assuming you don't do them both on the same day? Do you have to do one of them first? So the answer is you don't have to do either of them first. Okay, obviously you could file the LLC first, and then the trademark will be owned by the LLC. If you file the trademark first, what happens is that the owner is going to just be you in your personal capacity, because the LLC doesn't exist yet. So it's just going to be you. It'd be, for me, Elizabeth Potts Weinstein, an individual citizen of the United States who lives in California. And then the address that I have is going to be in the trademark office database. So it's going to be my mailing address and even my physical location address, my street address, which in this case would be my apartment. So that information is going to be in a database. Your street address, your physical location address is private from the public. It's not a public database, that part of it. That part is just seen by the trademark office. The reason they have that is because you can only file a trademark yourself if you're physically in the United States. If you're outside the United States, you have to have a lawyer help you. I don't know why. That's just a rule that they have. It actually changed recently. Then what happens after you form your LLC is you would assign, kind of like selling, the trademark to the LLC. Actually, it can be part of the capital that you invest in the LLC, is that you give this trademark to the LLC in return for membership shares of the LLC, which is kind of like stock of the LLC. The disadvantage of that is that your name, your personal name, is kind of in there, and there's a little bit of potential liability there. Probably not a lot, but sometimes there may be. And that information is publicly seen, your name and such. Also, the other side of that is that if you wait to file your trademark application, maybe someone else will file one on the same name. And since you're not selling anything yet, it's the trademark office filing date that says who has it first. If you're already selling, it's different, but I'm assuming that you're not selling because this is a brand new business where you haven't formed your LLC. So most of the time, we're probably going to go ahead and do the trademark application first, unless you think you might change your name, you're really, really cash starved, that kind of thing. Then we may wait and do the LLC first. And also sometimes we kind of just do file the LLC, file a trademark the next day. So if you do have, there's LLC online filing in your state has a really fast turnover, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, the next question that I'm going to answer is how to keep the credit history in your business when you move from your one state to another. So I have a video that goes into the details of if you have an LLC or a corporation for that matter, and you're moving from one state to another because you're personally moving from one state to another. How do you go ahead and do that? And there's a number of ways you can do that. But you may want to keep the credit history of your business so you can get a loan or sign a lease or whatever in the new state. But just to let you know, an LLC or corporation has a credit history, has a credit rating. A Dun & Bradstreet credit rating is the one that most people refer to, kind of like your own personal credit rating. And it's independent from you, unless you're going to co-sign the loan or co-sign the lease, which sometimes you end up having to because your business doesn't have any credit. So you want to keep that credit. How do you do that? If you dissolve the LLC in one state and then form a new one in the other state, it's like the old business didn't exist. You don't get that credit rating taken over because it's a different legal entity. However, if you do the other process that I talk about in that video, which is you either merge, convert, or use one of these other processes to move your LLC or corporation to the other state without it being dissolved. And which process you use depends on which processes are on the books in each state. You could also be domestication is another one that it's called. Then the same legal entity goes over, and then you get to keep all the credit rating stuff, which is important for a lot of people, especially if you need to get a loan funding or if you're signing a lease. In a perfect world, you as the business owner, you would never have to co-sign anything for your business. But a lot of times when you first start, you do. So like when I first started this law firm, I had to co-sign my American Express card So my American Express card is also under my personal credit rating, not just the business. So I'm liable for the Amex debt of my business. However, I have another loan that, because my business has built up a credit rating over many, many years, that I didn't have to co-sign for at all, which was super awesome. Just the business has it on the book. So it's not on my personal credit record, and also I'm not personally liable for it. The advantage of that is if something happens to your business someday out in the future, and you have to declare bankruptcy or something, you don't want to have personally co-signed for any of those loans. You want just the business to be liable for that lawsuit debt, or not be able to pay off a loan because the business goes under, or some situation like 2020 happened, whatever, who knows what it could be. You don't want to be liable for that personally. Okay, just looking to see if there's anything else. So another question is about business licenses. So if you have an online business where you're selling to customers in all 50 states, in theory, do you have to get a business license everywhere? Now, if you actually did have to get a business license everywhere, this would be incredibly onerous, because in some states, like Nevada, for example, you just get a business license in the entire state. You get it from the state of Nevada. In some states, they don't even have business license. It's not a thing that they do. In other states, it's on a local level. So like here in California, usually it's the city. So like the city of San Francisco, the city of San Jose, the city of Los Angeles. In some parts of California, it's the county that gives out business licenses. So do you need a business license just where you're located, or everywhere that you sell your products and services? So the short answer is that if the only contact you have with that city, state, county, whatever, is you ship something to them, to a human person located in that place, there's not really a tie between you and that location that creates enough nexus, which is the legal term, for you to need to file a business license. Where people come into needing to file a business license when they're an online business is typically because they actually are located there. So you as the owner are working there, or your employee is working there, or they are appearing there in person, even for a short period of time. So for example, if you go to a trade show, if you go to a flea market that's in a different city or state or county than you're located, you may need a business license for that. Not always. And sometimes they have a special one just for those purposes. And it obviously depends on what you're doing. So if you're going to a flea market where you're going to be, or a farmer's market, and you're going to be there every week or once a month, you may need a regular business license. But if you're just going to a trade show that you go one time a year, or maybe never again, there might be a special license just for trade shows. So it's something to be aware of, that generally don't need to update it. It's typically going to be some kind of physical location where you're taking advantage of that physical location, and that's how they're getting jurisdiction over you. Jurisdiction means what government you're subject to. So that's why. Okay, we got another question from Lisa K. So for a sole proprietor with a DBA, no LLC, what's the right order? Okay, I'm going to read this is what the order that she proposes to do things in. This is always a big issue for everyone, because it's really hard to figure out you have this huge list of all the to-dos. What order do you do it in? So Lisa's asking, first she gets a virtual address, register the DBA, open a bank account, get a home occupation permit, get a business license. Okay, so I agree. First thing, to get a virtual address, you're going to need the address for everything. Okay. Register the DBA. I agree that getting the DBA started and you're in Southern California, so this is someone who's in California. DBAs are from the county, and then you have to get it published in the newspaper in California. That takes like weeks to get done. So you want to get that started on the front end on a relatively early side. Opening up the bank account, that could be done kind of anywhere in between there. But before you do number 3, you may want to get your EIN, your employer identification number. An EIN isn't necessarily just about having employees. It's also the think of it like the tax ID number, the social security number for your business. You can use your own social security number. You don't have to get an EIN as a sole proprietor. But if you want to use the EIN because you don't want to have to give your personal social security number to all kinds of random people and all kinds of random forms that ends up coming up later, do it before you get your bank account, because you have to, on the bank account, you have to use either your social security number or your EIN. So you make that decision in between there. Fourth, home occupation permit. Fifth, business license. It depends on where you are. Sometimes those are done together. Sometimes you have to get the home occupation permit before the business license. And then to the business license people, you give them the permit showing that it's there. So this is probably the right order. You'd want to look at the website for the exact city that you're in to make sure that they don't have a particular order that they want the permits done and business licenses done in. I think I've always seen permits before business licenses, but every city does their own thing, and occasionally they come up with some new system. Sometimes it's all one big giant piece of paperwork. Okay, let's see. I talked about that stuff. Do you guys have any other questions? I kind of out of the questions that people had asked so far. So if you have any questions about trademarks, about starting your business, about forming your LLC, sole proprietorships, DBAs, business licenses, what other stuff, contracts, stuff you need for your website, any of those kind of things, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and then I'll answer them. And if I don't get any more questions, then I'll wrap up for today. I'm going to be doing these every couple months. So you can always tune into the next one with your questions. I'm also probably in the next couple weeks, maybe a month or two, going to launch a membership program. One of the levels of the membership program, it's going to be through the YouTube website. One of the members levels will be Zoom calls where you'll be able to, like, we can actually have a conversation where you can ask your question live and with your voice and your face on there, and we can go back and forth. And so I think that will be a nice way to get some help for starting your business. So if I don't, maybe check and make sure there's nothing else in here. Okay, I don't see any other questions go in. If you have any other questions, you can, of course, post them in the comments below, and I'll see if I can point you in the right direction. If you found this live stream helpful, hit the thumbs up. And of course, if you aren't yet subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to learn more about how to start your business and get legal tips about all these different aspects of getting your business off the ground. Thank you guys for watching today. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, I had one more question come in that I just saw. Okay. The question is, can we open a 501c3 nonprofit where the LLC is the owner of the nonprofit? So nobody is the owner of a nonprofit, which sounds weird, right? But a nonprofit in the United States, a 501c3 nonprofit, you could think of it as being owned by like the public generally. So any organization that's a nonprofit is for the interest of the public. So nobody really owns it. Sometimes LLCs or other corporations are associated, or other people are associated with a 501c3 or a foundation or whatever, and they set it up so they can take their profits from the LLC and put it into this nonprofit and then, do nonprofit work. But nobody owns that by itself. So yeah, setting up nonprofits is fairly complicated. It's not something that I help people with because it is a specialty. But that's the idea, is that it's an independent organization that's for the benefit of the public generally. So nobody owns it and it doesn't make a profit, obviously. All right. So assuming there's no other questions, then I am going to sign off and one more. Okay, now that I'm saying no more other questions, people are like really getting the questions in. What does a failure to serve as a trademark mean? Failure to serve. I actually don't know. I'm going to Google failure to serve trademark. Oh, so I'm assuming, because failure to serve would be something about a trademark litigation suit. Um, I would imagine that you're probably before the Trademark Trial and Appeal Board, and there's some sort of opposition proceeding before the TTAB. If you're doing that, it's kind of like a lawsuit. And anytime you have any kind of legal proceeding that's with another person, you have to serve any papers on them or discovery or motions or whatever by a certain time, in a certain time frame. If you don't do that, then sometimes there's something that can be done, but sometimes if it's the very first set of papers, then you have to start over again, is the short answer to that. So I don't do TTAB proceedings anymore because they're litigation-like, and I don't do litigation anymore. You may need to talk to a lawyer about trying to fix it, but in some cases you have to start over. It really depends on the rules of that court. I'd actually might call or send email the clerk or whoever the admin court person is to ask them so they can give you some more details and refer you. They're not going to give you legal advice, but they might refer you to which rule applies. Here's another question. Why do banks ask for the NAICS code when you open a business checking account? You can actually get that code, asked about that code a lot. You also get it for business license. I imagine they want that code so they know what they have to do for reporting purposes. So because any bank that is FDIC insured is going to be governed by the United States federal rules for banks, which have lots and lots of very specific rules. There are certain kind of businesses that may not be able to get a bank account, like you have a business related to cannabis, things like that are typically have problems. And then also there's other kinds of certain businesses that have more regulations to them that the bank is going to need to know about. That's part of the reason. I also think that it comes up a lot just as it's like one of these generic things they put in forms that aren't actually important. So the best thing to do for those codes is, obviously you can go Google that and there's a list of codes. For a lot of businesses, you're going to be in some generic category of consulting services or internet sales, things like that are fairly broad. A lot of those categories were more written for businesses back in the day versus online things, which is somewhat annoying, but kind of just how it is. So if you have any other questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. Let me go look and see if there's anything else here. That is one kind of interesting thing about doing live streams, is because there's a little bit of a delay. I will say something here and it takes a while for things to come up in the chat, but that is just how this technology goes. Hopefully the sound is better than last time. I got a new microphone, and so hopefully the little noise that was in the last live stream isn't there. If you have any other questions, I'll give you another minute or two. Please go ahead and post them, and then otherwise after that I'll sign off. I think I may need to do a video sometime about doing trademark appeals process, so people kind of understand what that process is, and trademark opposition proceedings and stuff. Not because any one video could even explain all the details of it, but just so you know what goes into that. And it's kind of a lawsuit that's an extravaganza. So it is something that I used to do, but I'm not doing it now just because it's so litigation-like. It doesn't work for the way I manage my business. Any good legal subscription services that help with legal part of opening a business? It's hard because I'm so judgmental about a lot of the different services out there. I think one of the problems is that the services like LegalZoom, for example, tend to be overly expensive for what they actually are, because you have to give them so much. You have to do so much yourself anyway. It's almost like you're filling out a form that they're just going to fill out a form, and it's not incredibly helpful for people. I'm looking for. There is a. Let me go find it. There's a registered agent service that actually does. That has helpful information for you that I do recommend to people, called northwestregisteredagent.com. I'm actually going to post it in the chat. This is a company that I've had clients use for their registered agent services for their LLC. They also have good tips on there. And one of the great things that they do is, if you use a registered agent, you can use their address, the registered agent address, as the address for your business in the legal filings. Because, for example, if you do a LLC here in California, you have to have a street address, not just your mailing address. And some of the virtual address services don't count as a street address, because California knows that they're virtual and that they're not street addresses. But you could use their registered agent address as your street address, because it is a physical place. They have a physical place for this. So that's a good place to start. I found that they were a reputable company that hasn't been like raising their fees all the time or any ridiculousness like that. So that's what I would look at. Most of the other services that I've run into either are just filing forms for you, or they're a service where they kind of assign you to random lawyers. So it all depends upon which lawyer you get. And some of them are good and some of them aren't. Okay, so another question came in from Edgar. He hires independent contractor to a company, and later when they send the invoice, the company says that contractor is actually a partner with an oral agreement. Yeah, that's pretty bizarre. I don't even understand what happened. So typically, if someone's an independent contractor, hopefully they actually had a written contract, but sometimes they don't have a written contract. Being a partner in a business has to be a agreement. I mean, you don't have to have a written agreement to be a partnership, but it needs to be something that both sides agreed to. So obviously, sometimes people have miscommunications, but it would be very strange for a company and a contractor to accidentally be in some kind of partnership. You would want to look at the paper trail. Like, so one of the things about oral contracts is that just doesn't mean things you say out loud. That also means emails and voicemails and texts and all that stuff. That all gets wrapped into a non-written agreement, because you didn't sign the text with a pen or anything, So go back, and I would recommend someone going back and looking at every email, everything written on a piece of paper, every text, voicemails, whatever you have to put together that would be evidence to show this is a contractual relationship. This is not a partnership. Contractual relationship would be something where you agreed to work for a certain period of time and get paid a certain amount of money, as opposed to a partnership where you and the other side are joining together to hopefully make a profit. And there's no promise that anyone's going to get paid anything, which is what I'm assuming that the company's trying to get out of paying somebody by saying we were going into business together to make a profit. I would imagine most of the time with contractors, there'd be some paper trail or electronic trail to show that you were doing a service in return for getting paid. And also, they would also look at the kind of work that you were doing and things like that. Depending on how much money is, that may be a case where you have to take someone to small claims court, and then you would have to prove up that this was a contractual relationship and how much money you're supposed to get paid on and all that kind of stuff. So kind of think about what evidence you would use to address that. So yeah, I think that's a real bizarre situation. Is a bank that you recommend for a business checking account? That's the kind of thing that changes all the time. And so my bank account's at Bank of America, which I am not saying is the most easy entry level thing. It's because I had all my personal accounts there. So I was already like in their system. Yeah, I would. So deposit limit, no free monthly fees, minimum balance. The thing is that generally speaking, for business accounts, they're going to charge a lot more fees and things. So I haven't heard of any, and a lot of credit unions don't have business bank accounts. If you have access to a credit union, because you're in certain places, they have them. If you're in the military or used to be in the military, some sort of association that you're in, you might be able to find a credit union that actually has business checking accounts. A lot of them don't, but some of them do. That's one of the places I look. There may be online banks now that are doing business checking accounts, but most of them aren't the last time I looked. So yeah, it sucks. My business account, I have to keep this huge amount of money in there to not have to pay a monthly fee. And you don't necessarily want to keep huge amounts of money in there. And in the beginning, I didn't have huge amounts of money in there when I first started, obviously. So yeah, I don't have a good solution for that. I think that how business banks work is they give all these cool benefits to individuals and then charge small businesses a lot of fees. Big businesses don't pay that stuff, but the small people do, which sucks. Yeah, so you're welcome, Edgar. Do you guys have any other questions? You can go ahead and post them in the chat. Well, that's over there. Can a business have 2 or more codes? If on a form they only let you have 1 code, then you would just put the one that you're primary doing. A lot of businesses effectively have more than 1 line of business. I mean, Coca-Cola can't put 1 code because Coca-Cola, not only do they sell sodas, they also sell water. They also sell hats and t-shirts, right? Like they sell a gazillion different things. So a lot of businesses have more than 1 that apply to them. So you'd probably just want to put your primary one. There are some places where you can list 2 or 3, but for a lot of things like a bank or whatever, you would, or sometimes even a business license, you would only put 1. Sometimes in some forms, like in business licenses, they'll ask for the code, and then they'll also have a line where you can say, what is your business? And then you can put all the things that you're doing. How does a small business grow if they need to hire workers but are unable to pay employee benefits? That's a very broad question. So one of the things that I've done in my business is I give people benefits that don't cost anything, at least not cash out of my pocket. So for example, I am incredibly flexible about time off. If I have a certain amount of sick leave, a certain amount of PTO, and then I have time off that it's unpaid. And if someone needs to take off time to, go to the doctor, take care of somebody, and they've already used up all their sick leave and PTO, then I give them that time off. I don't pay them for that, but they can take it off. That's a way I'm able to give a benefit to somebody. It does cost me because the work has to get done and I have to do it or whatever, but it's not cash out of my pocket. So you might think about what can you offer people that's about flexibility. They're allowed to work from home. They can work from anywhere. These kinds of other things that you can give to people. So that way they are receiving a benefit that's not cash out of your pocket, for example. That's the thing that I've done myself in my own business. How would the owner pay themselves from the LLC such that LLC business income is not their owner income? So if you want the LLC's income to not be your income, then it has to be taxed as a corporation. So, and to some extent, you'd want to talk to a tax person or an accountant about this because it starts to get into real details of tax things that it would depend on your exact particular situation. So if you create an LLC and it's taxed as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, then you're the one paying the taxes on the profit. If it's taxed as an S corp, while you may pay yourself a payroll, distributions and things, the profit still goes through to you on your K-1. So if you want it to be 100% separate, then you would have an LLC taxed as a C corporation. However, it does pay taxes on the income, what percent that is depends upon what the law is currently. And this is like something that's currently in huge debate. And also some states will pay you have to pay taxes on, the corporation would have to pay taxes. So it may or may not be better or worse. So Mark asks, any disadvantages of creating a single member LLC and creating a DBA for the second similar business? Oh, okay. I see what you mean. A lot of my clients do this where they have one LLC that's like the umbrella, and then they have, maybe even multiple DBAs under that. The disadvantage is that everything under that umbrella is effectively legally the same business. So for example, this part of the business is very, very profitable, and then this part gets sued by somebody. Well, this part that's profitable has to pay for that lawsuit because they're all in the same business. For a lot of my clients, that doesn't matter because the business is really them, and they just have kind of different branding things that are separate for whatever reason, maybe because of different target markets. And so that's why they're separating it. It's still just them. They're not worried about it. But I've also had clients where one of their businesses has a lot more risk to it, or maybe it's taking out a loan or something, and they want to keep that legally separate. And so that's when they'll form out two LLCs. Anytime you form multiple LLCs or corporations for that matter, you're increasing your costs. So that may not make sense at the very beginning. In California, you have $800 franchise fee every year. You have a lot of LLCs that adds up very, very fast when you're in the beginning. So Edgar asks, is it tricky for misclassification of an employee according to the IRS? And the idea is the workers doing service for small business that's in line with how a small business makes money. Yes. And the IRS is not the biggest stickler. It's the states, especially like California is, off the chart on how picky they are. But there's a lot of other states like that too. So it depends on what the worker's doing for somebody. So for example, I have a law firm, right? So if I hired like a paralegal to file the trademark applications for me, and I hired them at a contractor, the state of California would be like, they're not a contractor because they're doing something essential literally for your clients. That makes no sense. Of course, that person is an employee. Now, it'd be different than if I hire a bookkeeper to do the bookkeeping for my business, not for my clients, but for my own business. And this bookkeeper has, 40 different clients, or I don't know how many clients bookkeepers have, that they all do their books for. I'm just one of their clients. They have a completely separate, legit business. They're not working on my clients' books. They're working on my books. So that's an example of a good case for an independent contractor. It really depends on the state by state. The IRS tends to really go out only after big businesses. States go after everybody. I mean, California will go after, a one-person business that hires one person. And so typically though, where it comes up is they are not going to just like randomly investigate you unless they're investigating a whole industry. Like California's gone after, I think, yoga places, yoga studios. Then they go after all the yoga studios, but generally they don't do that. They don't go after individuals. So where that will come up is you have an independent contractor and then you fire them or let them go, or you don't have any work for them. Then they go to the state and apply for unemployment payments, or they get injured and they go to the state and apply for workers' comp, something like that. And the state's like, we don't have any record of you having employees. And then that's a whole thing. So that tends to be where you get in trouble for it. So not something that happens at the beginning. It's something that happens way far down the line. So if you keep people happy, then sometimes you end up sliding under the radar. But there are some states like California that are really, really hyper about prosecuting this. There's some other states that as long as you have a good independent contractor agreement that spells out that they're an independent contractor, then it shifts the burden and the other person has to prove that they're an employee. So it really goes on state by state. And it's the state that person is located in. So if they're virtual and you're in Arizona, but they're physically located in California, then you need to worry about California law more than Arizona. So if you have any other questions, you can go ahead and post them in there. I'll take a drink of water. I have allergies and stuff just been bothering me today or last couple of days. So hopefully my voice sounds okay on this live stream. It was probably not the optimal day for me to be doing live stream talking for this amount of time when I'm having allergy issues. Is there a 100% surefire way to test to prove that someone's not a partner? So whether or not someone is in a partnership is about, are you jointly engaged in something to earn a profit? I'm trying to think of which way the law would default on. I would think that someone has to prove that the partnership exists. I mean, there's obviously not a partnership agreement or something that's a slam dunk. It's very hard to prove a negative, right? But that's because the person who says it's a partnership, it's their burden to prove it's a partnership. If you're proving something that's an independent contractor relationship, you just, obviously there's an independent contractor agreement. If there's something written down that says, I will do X service for X dollars, whether it's hourly wage, whether it's a fixed fee, doesn't matter. That shows independent contractor or contractual relationship as opposed to a partnership, which let's do this project together and we'll split the profits 50-50. That's usually how it works. A business phone and business email service you recommend? There's not a particular one that I recommend. For my business phone, I just use Google Voice. And it works out fine. I also, for my email service, I use not Gmail, but the Google, the Google business side of email, and I pay a fee for that. There's pluses and minuses to using Google stuff, but we're here on YouTube, so we're all using Google stuff right now. That I found that to work really well for me. I do recommend paying a little bit for your email stuff, so that way you get better customer service and things like that. But that's what I'm using for my business. And my business, I have my email address is at elizabethpw.com, so it has my own domain. I think that's very helpful when you're in business to make someone look legit. So let me know if you have any other questions. It's 12:42. I'll probably stop in a couple of minutes. And so I did a video on the legal requirements of a business website. And let me see if I can find it. And I can post it in here. Website. Yeah, so here's, where can I give the link? I'll just click on it and then find it. There we go. So here's a video that I did that is the 6 legal requirements for a website. So you can go ahead and check that out. You're looking at things like your privacy policy and terms and conditions and things like that. The biggest one that everybody's really going to need is a privacy policy. And how much does an operating agreement help in case of a lawsuit? So an operating agreement is going to be really helpful to prove that your business is an LLC that's separate from you, as opposed to just an extension of who you are. So I recommend having an operating agreement because it really doesn't cost that much of anything. If you're like one owner business, you can find a form that's applicable to your state law for where your LLC is formed. And then you're showing that you're running your LLC as a real business. Now, if you're your LLC is owned by multiple people, the operating agreement is like your partnership agreement. It's really, really important then. you don't have to have one legally, but you definitely want one because it says who's supposed to do what and how you guys are going to pay out profits and all these things that you want to decide ahead of time when you still like each other and are having conflict versus way far in the future. I've had clients where they didn't do an operating agreement and then things fell apart. What the worst one was when they were married, a couple, and then they got divorced. So this is like, it's kind of like a prenup, but for your business. And you decide all those things ahead of time. But even if you're a one owner business, you can do one. It's really simple. It's a really simple thing to do when it's just one owner. So I'm going to be signing off in a few seconds. Thank you guys. The non-solicitation clause for employee. So one thing about non-solicitation clauses is they're not enforceable everywhere. They're not enforceable in California, for example. So you really need to look at the state law that you're in that applies to this. As if you're looking in California, it would be California, but it could be many different places. You have to look at exactly what the scope is of that to see if it's enforceable. And I've had clients where it wasn't enforceable, but it was still in their contract, but they knew it wasn't enforceable. So, knowing how to keep good relationships with ex-clients and all that stuff with non-solicitation things, I mean, that becomes a very complicated question to answer. But I think the place to start really is to look at, is this even enforceable? Sometimes it is, but you have to be really, really narrow about what you're doing and limit it to trade secrets and things like that. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you have other questions, you can post them in the comments after the video is at the live stream is done, and then I can check that out and point you in the right direction. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.